Well, we've heard a lot of back and forth in this campaign, and the purpose of this interview is to be more like a conversation. It's not going to be a gotcha interview. And the questions will be more of a personal nature, we hope, so that you can get to know the candidate. So I want to welcome Bill Walker, who is running for governor on the Unity ticket. It's a merged ticket with your independent candidacy and Byron Malott as a Democrat. So let's start there, because I think a lot of people want a better sense of how that came to be. And maybe you can start by just telling us, where did it happen? Where did that discussion take place?
You know, actually, I think it may have begun a year ago, quite honestly. We both were at the AFN convention, and he was invited up on stage to at the AFN convention, and on his way up on stage by himself, he came over to me. This is in the Carlson Center in Fairbanks. He said, "I would be honored if you would join me on stage." And I was really taken by that here I am, we're running against each other. Then was a Republican and him as a Democrat. And he would invite me up on stage. And we got up on stage, he took the microphone and he introduced me. And I was just taken by that gesture of statesmanship. And actually, I would talk about that on my campaign, and sometimes my strategy people said, "You know, Bill, it's not really a good idea to be, bragging about the guy that you're running against quite so much." But I that sort of started a relationship that Byron and I had, that it just sort of continued to. We early on met and said we weren't going to have this kind of a relationship.
But we want to be a fly on the wall and know, where the decision was made.
Well,
give us the setting.
Fast forward. That was a year ago. Fast forward. Actually, quite honestly, it happened because I missed a flight to Bethel. I came in from Kodiak, where we had a debate. I got in about 1 o'clock in the morning. I had a 6:20 flight to Bethel. I got to the airport in plenty of time, but my little BlackBerry, which I hang on to, and not many people have those anymore, said Raven. The reminder for the flight was Raven. So I stand in front of the Raven line, and I get up there, and they don't have me on the flight, and they go, "Something's wrong here," and it's really Alaska Airlines. And so I went over to the Alaska Airlines counter, and of course at that point the flight had closed out, so I could not go to Bethel on that Friday. So it's the first day off since April 2013 when I filed. So what do I do with this day off? And so I thought, I'm going to call up Byron, and I want to sit down and have a discussion with him because I owed it to my supporters to say I've done everything I can. So many of my supporters across the state kept saying, "You guys need to get together. You need to do whatever you can do to get together." And so I wanted to be able to tell my supporters we had done everything we could. And that was really the only opportunity we had to really sit down and do that.
So where did that take place?
That took place in my office. And I said, let's sit down and see if something can be worked out. So it was Byron, a couple people in his campaign, and then myself and a couple people on my campaign. And we sat down and we couldn't figure it out. And by 6 o'clock that night, we just said, we tried. I don't think it's going to work. But later that night, I got a call from Byron. He said, "I think I see a way forward." And so the next day we got together. Now we're talking Saturday. Got together in late morning, early afternoon, and said, "Okay, now let's see if this can happen." In the middle of that, I raced back to Valdez for my class reunion dinner Saturday night, come back Sunday morning, and really it was put together on Sunday and Monday, and then we rolled it out on Tuesday.
So what sealed the deal? Was there anything pivotal?
Yes. What was sealed the deal is we saw the polls that showed that Alaska wanted a new governor. I mean, the current governor could not get over 40% in any of the polls, so clearly the majority of Alaskans wanted a new governor. Us, in a three-way, we're not going to give them that option of a new governor. So we decided to put partisanship aside and run together. It's not been done before. We don't know where the Unity ticket came from. We kind of got dubbed as Unity ticket, and that's fine. We didn't come up with that, but it does sort of, we did unify our campaigns, and I guess that's the message.
I guess people are trying to figure out how that would work, because traditionally you don't have co-governorships. And
we don't now, and we won't now. I'll be governor, and Byron will be lieutenant governor, and all final decisions will be made by myself. There's statutory duties of the lieutenant governor and statutory duties of the governor, and those remain intact.
Well, governors do use lieutenant governors in unique ways. Mm-hmm. Fran Ulmer, when she was lieutenant governor for Tony Knowles, did a lot of work upgrading the state's voting machinery, bringing a lot of high tech in. So governors have different roles. How would you use Byron Malott?
Well, in many ways. I'm very excited about that opportunity to have a good relationship with that's not my lieutenant governor, it's Alaska's lieutenant governor. And what he'll do, certainly he'll provide, cover the statutory requirements of elections issues, the seal issue. But beyond that, there's so much more that I think on rural issues, he will be involved in that, perhaps Arctic issues. I mean, I think that there's a whole, he's a generational Alaskan. My goodness, there's so much he brings to the table that I'm anxious to have his input on. So I will certainly consult with him on a regular basis on issues. Of course, we will. We do that now on the campaign.
Because sometimes governors and lieutenant governors don't always see eye to eye. You see lieutenant governors' budgets being cut back,
Right.
nasty grams that
Right.
wind up in the media.
Yeah, we won't have that. We just won't. We've had the opportunity to select each other and to spend a year getting to know each other. And so the working relationship we have now, I fully expect will continue on into our administration. I mean, that's the plan, and he'll be part of very much a part of my administration.
Well, if Sean Parnell is reelected, he potentially could have more influence than any other governor in the state history by longevity, because
Sure.
he has a half term that he finished up when Sarah Palin stepped down. Then he would have 4 years and then another 4 years, more
Right.
than any other governor.
Right.
What do you think about that influence that he would have?
Well, it concerns me. I mean, I wouldn't be running for governor if I wasn't very, very concerned about the path that we're on as a state, the concern I have about the future of the state. And so I don't feel good about that, just because I think what where he has brought us has been really what causes me to do what I'm doing. I'm not a...
Well, talk about what kind of influence he would have that you worry about.
Well, I worry about he's brought us into the largest deficit in our state's history. You know, we are drawing down our savings at $7 million a day, and the concern I have, and that was all, predicated on $105 oil. You know, now we've seen oil prices come down, so at $105
And dropping
oil,
every day.
it is, but at 105, is that when he set the budget, and that was the $7 million a day drawdown. So it's only gotten worse, but he set this at a higher oil price. Even with a higher oil price, we're in a major deficit. A couple $1 billion a year. We have about $10 billion that's being drawn down. That's about 5 or 6 years of savings. What happens after that? That's a concern. I mean, I look at I come from a building background. I need a plan. We need a fiscal plan. We need an energy plan. We need to see where Alaska is going to be, 10 years from now, 20 years
Everybody
from now,
says
50
that,
years.
though. Every politician says we need a plan.
I guess.
It never happens.
Yeah,
it
well,
seems.
I guess sometimes their plan is the re-election plan, and that's not my plan. I'm not running because I have some political itch, or I just have some sort of a bucket list. I'm not looking for a political job. I'm very comfortable with the company that I own. I'm running because we don't have a plan.
I'm going to just turn the clock back, because I first met you probably about 10, 12 years ago. And the purpose of our meeting was to talk about the prospects of liquefied natural gas.
Right.
And at that time, everybody was talking about a natural gas line to the lower 48, and that this was uneconomical. You were sort of a Don Quixote figure back then, arguing about windows of opportunities that the state might lose and why LNG would be the best way to go. And so some people have kind of seen you as a one-horse guy, that LNG is, and LNG from Valdez is instead of Nikiski, as the current plan is.
Well, I've been on the right horse. Yeah, well, everybody's been riding the horse down. We wasted 10 years and billions of dollars with going down to the Alcan into the market that was robust with shale gas, and I presented that to the governor in 2009. All the shale gas in the lower 48, and nothing changed. So, I follow the direction of Bill Egan, Governor Egan, Governor Hammond, after they lost an election to Governor Egan, Governor Hickel, to Governor Hammond, they began the effort to bring gas to Tidewater. in the late 70s, early 80s. So all I've been doing is continuing to advance the right project. Now everybody has shifted over to the project we've been talking about, and the issue isn't where the terminus is. The issue is where the market is. The issue is where it goes to Asia. So whether the terminus is in Haines, in Valdez, in Point McKenzie, or in Nikiski, that's not really the issue. The issue is the market is in Asia. So I have said many times, I will complete the work that's been done. We start over too many times on these projects. My goodness, I will not start over. And I am not troubled by the terminus in Nikiski.
Well, one of the things that came out in some of the hearings that the legislature had this past session was this change in attitude that the oil industry said needs to happen. They said that the enemy is not state versus oil industry, but the competition that we face out in the world for our LNG. How do you feel about that?
Sure, I think that's partially correct. Our biggest competitors out in the world are Exxon, BP, and ConocoPhillips with their projects in Papua New Guinea, Tangguh, all around the world, the Gorgon project in Australia. So they're our biggest competitors are the very same people that we put in charge of this process. That does concern me a great deal. Most projects don't spend all their time in the regulatory permitting process. What's the route? What's it? They start with the market. They enter into long-term take-or-pay contract with the market, and then there's two pieces you need for a project. You need gas, and you need the market. The pieces in between are the almost incidental pieces that are not, you don't ever hear about. Yet that's all we do is we're going to do another pre-feed, we're going to do another open season, we're going to do another. But I've never seen a project anywhere in the world that does it the way we're doing it.
Now, one of the things that I do want to ask you about, and it might seem like an odd question, but from time to time I talk to retiring state employees and I ask them to characterize the various administrations. And sometimes that's a lot of fun. Governor Frank Murkowski, the one employee, characterized it as Bankerville. Tony Knowles, Deliland. Sarah Palin, Cookie Land. So I'm just kind of curious, how you would characterize your administration.
I think we'll be the building administration. We're going to build infrastructure that gets Alaska's resources to Alaskans and to the world market. And I'm just not talking about gas line. I'm talking about rail extensions, roads, those things that open up our state. We have the most resources in Alaska than any other state, and maybe and more so than some countries. We have a distribution problem. We don't have a resource problem. So I would expect we'll be known as the building, Bill the Builder, perhaps.
Bill the Builder.
I am so anxious for us to build the infrastructure we need to open up this state and build it with. I'm very passionate about local hire. Very passionate about local hire.
But as you yourself have pointed out, we've got a coming budget shortfall. Maybe a long stretch, a dry stretch for the state. We have a lot of big ticket mega projects on the table. Susitna Dam, a road out of Juneau to a marine ferry terminal. So we have things that people want to spend a lot of money on.
No lack of those, but you have to put them all on the table and decide what ones make sense. Such as a gas line. The analysis by Wood Mackenzie showed that it would bring potentially, under their analysis, $419 billion of revenue to the project. That'll stay on the table. There's no question about that. So, those that add to the economy of the state, that open up for mining in the interior. Joe Usabelli explained to me about 6 months ago. He said, "Bill, if it wasn't for the Alaska Railroad, we wouldn't be in business. We're not in the transportation business. We're in the mining business. So we need to look at opportunities to provide infrastructure, in interior, on the North Slope for more oil and gas exploration. So it's really about building the infrastructure that allows the private sector to do what it does best."
So speaking of infrastructure, let's talk about the railroad. What do you see for that? It's a state-owned railroad.
I'm excited about the potential with the railroad. I see that opportunities for mining, for export of our resources. As the Arctic opens up, there's some numbers I've seen as many as 2,000 ships a year will be transiting Alaska through the Arctic. Should we have rail opportunities there to export some of our resources that way? I think we should. So that's when I say I want to see a plan. I want to see a plan that involves the development of this state, but it really comes down to resource extraction, but in a way that leaves the maximum benefit to Alaskans, as our constitutional mandate is.
Well, one potential project, the Pebble Mine project, has lots of gold and copper and lots of potential revenue for the state out of this. How do you feel about that project?
You know, I'm concerned about that project, and based upon what I know now about the Pebble Mine, I'm not supportive of it. My concern is half of the wild salmon in the world comes back into that region. So I worry about when we're sort of competing a renewable resource with a non-renewable resource. Alaska has plenty of mining locations and opportunities, so I'm concerned about that. Maybe there can be information provided that would satisfy my concern, but right now, with what I've received and reviewed, I'm concerned about that mine.
So I think that this is a question that you don't hear asked much in campaigns. Is you know, if you look back on your life, you know, and we kind of see life as a random walk. You know, sometimes you encounter people, encounter situations, and by gosh, 15, 20 years down the road, it means something. It has an impact. In your life, any things that now are very significant that may not have been in the past?
Well, you know, I think one thing that's come to mind is very early, I was a very young age in Delta Junction, probably 4 or 5.
That's when you were growing up?
When I was growing up, we didn't have running water. We had an outhouse, and I remember so well one night in the middle of the winter, had to go to the outhouse, got up, put on my boots, about 40, 50 below. Off to the outhouse I went, and when I came out of the outhouse, in the meantime, a herd of buffalo had moved in between the outhouse and our home. I had a difficult decision to make, and I stood there, and I knew what would happen if I stayed at that outhouse at 40 below. And walking through a herd of buffalo at 5 years old was not very enticing, but I had to do that. And I just sort of stuck with me, that moment of, and still walking through a herd of buffalo would be a bit intimidating, but as a 5-year-old. So, you know, that was sort of that, and also the earthquake was a big, I think, big impact on my life, as far as how we dealt with it as a community, how we dealt with it as a family, how my father and mother dealt with that incident, what happened, what we did after that earthquake. So I think that I think you're right, we are all part of our past. That makes up who we are today. And I think that seeing the decisions that were made, we were in the house building business, and I was 12 at the time, and I was, we lost everything during the earthquake and started over again.
Well, all politicians have public and private sides, and I think that in the end, when we go to the poll, we are searching for an understanding of a person's private side. And I think some people have been worried about some of your positions on gay marriage, abortion. You know, on the one hand, you say you're personally against those, but on the other hand, you know, some of the conservatives don't think that you would do enough to support those positions. Sure,
and I have heard that a bit. You know, Don and I we're a Christian family. We're faith-based, but that is not my social conservative social views are not what brings me to run for governor. Those are not what's I'm concerned about. Other issues in our state I will follow a series of Republican governors and Republican legislators, and they've turned the dial about as much, I think, as they're going to turn on that. But what I will do as governor...
But what about gay marriage?
Well, what I will do is I will put my hand on the Bible, and I will swear to uphold the laws that are in place, and I will do that. I think that issue, most likely by the time I'm sworn in, will be resolved, I believe. I mean, it certainly is going in that direction. That issue will be resolved, and I'll follow the will of the direction of the courts on that. And I'll also follow the will of the courts on issues associated with, abortion issues, and that is legal, and I'm not running for office to make any modifications of that. Now, in the unlikely event that a bill comes across my desk that deals with those issues, I will certainly, consult with my Attorney General, whoever she or he may be, and I will certainly consult with my administration and with parties on both sides of that issue. Then I alone will make that decision as the governor as far as what I do with that piece of legislation. You know what? A lot of people have said, that's a process that we're pretty comfortable with. It's a fair
So where
process.
are you though, personally? If you were talking to your kids or
Oh,
your wife, how do you feel about gay marriage?
I certainly believe that my faith-based belief is that a marriage is between a husband, a man and a woman. But again, I'm not running to change anything that's in place at this point.
One of the things, from following the legislature, you'll see is that some of these social issues consume a lot of oxygen in the legislature. Do you feel like government is the place to work those issues out?
Well, it does take up a lot of time in the legislature, and I guess that's something that my running mate and I don't necessarily see eye to eye on those issues. But that's okay, because we've realized that the areas we agree on are much broader than the areas we don't agree on. So we've agreed that, and what causes us to run are almost identical issues about issues our economy, education, Medicaid expansion, those kinds of things, health care in general. Those kinds of things are what cause us to run. And the other issues we don't necessarily agree on are issues that we basically have agreed to a process on. But I will remain to have the ultimate decision on that.
But there are times when social issues intrude into government, and perhaps maybe the best example of that is the National Guard scandal, revelations and reports that there was fraud, sexual assault, sexual harassment, and it was tolerated for a long, long time. Now, you were privy to some of this early. Apparently, you were approached by some of the National Guard chaplains.
Yes, I was, and though I don't see that as social issues. I see that as my goodness, that's sexual assault. Allegations of sexual assault need to be investigated immediately, and that's how I would do it, and that's why I have done it. As a municipal contract municipal attorney, when a client calls me and said someone has come in with these allegations, I say to them, you bring in a private investigator immediately. Certainly don't go back to, if someone has gone around a chain of command within an administration, to report them, especially if it's somebody that, 2 chaplains have come in. You don't go back and check with the people they've gone around to see how it's going. That's what happened.
So going forward, let's suppose that you do get elected. It sounds like these issues were a long time in the making, and they're going to be a long time in sorting out and establishing credibility. So what would you do as governor?
Well, there needs to be a process in place. The process should have worked. In other words, with 2 chaplains going to the governor and saying this is what's going on, the governor should have brought in and immediately called the troopers or somebody to start an investigation. All you need is an allegation. You don't need clear and convincing evidence. It's not a jury. It's allegations. And when they're coming from 2 chaplains who victims have come to them for counsel, my goodness, I don't think it gets any stronger than that. So what will be different in our administration is that we will have a process whereby when someone is a victim of sexual assault, domestic violence, or something within the administration, that there's a process for them that'll take them so they don't have to feel trapped in a process that doesn't allow there to be an investigation. So, there'll be an opportunity for that to take place. That, in effect, should have been what happened in this situation, but it did not. For reasons unknown, the governor chose to not have anybody independent look at it, and it just continued on for about 3 or 4 years.
Well, I asked some of our crew here, what should I ask Bill Walker? And one said, ask him about politics. And I said, politics? But I think maybe in the spirit of the question is how do you feel about politics? Is it a tool? Is it a weapon?
I guess, Rhonda, I don't really look at politics a bit differently. It's unusual for someone who filed to run for governor as a Republican to be now running with someone who filed to run for governor as a Democrat. I look at it as more of a team effort. I sort of pride myself at surrounding myself with folks that don't necessarily all agree with me, but are the best and the brightest, because I want that input. I think you have a better decision. The best decision comes when there are differing views in the discussion. So that's what I look forward to in our administration, and not necessarily have all one brand or another brand. I just don't think that, this battle we see go on in Washington, this gridlock that we complain about, there's not a lot we can do about that. There is something we can do about that here in Alaska, and that's what this candidacy is all about, is saying, here's a new way of doing business in Alaska. We sit down as Alaskans, not as one party or another party. We check our initials at the door, and we push politics aside and solve the problems. So I'm looking forward to that.
One has to give your opponent, the current governor, some credit. His management of the legislature was pretty masterful. He got a lot done in the last session. A lot of big bills. He didn't get everything he wanted, but he accomplished a lot by leveraging, by really demanding a lot of his Republican majority. Where in the Murkowski administration, it kind of disintegrated at times.
Well, I guess my concern, Rhonda, is when you have the majority and minority battling back and forth, there's a whole lot of things on the minority side, whichever side might be in the minority at the time, that doesn't sort of get involved in the process. So, and the other part that I'm concerned about is, I come from local government, as does Byron. We're concerned that sort of local input has been sort of pushed aside and pushed away from the process, and we want to make sure the local representation, local input is available, and because we end up with a better process rather than just what goes on in Juneau. We want the input from around the state, from those that are going to be impacted by the decisions that are made. So it's not just about what happens in Juneau, it's what happens across the state as well.
Well, one of the biggest problems for every governor is dealing with the challenges of helping rural Alaska. It's costly, and it seems like you could look back the last 10, 20, 30 years, the same problems are still out there: energy, lack of jobs, the social problems, domestic violence, tribal recognition. How are you going to deal with that? And then maybe let's start with the relationship with the tribes.
Oh, I think the problem we have, my concern is what we've done in the past. We typically have reached for the litigation tool. We end up in litigation. You know, the first tool I pull out of the toolbox is a cup of coffee.
And you're a lawyer.
I am a lawyer. I am a lawyer. But you know what? That's the last one that I will ever use, because I start with a conversation, and I start with people, the stakeholders at the table. And sometimes when you bring the people with opposing sides of the table, some interesting things will happen. Some people will hear something differently they hadn't heard before. So I will start with a discussion about that. And I think that our relationship has gotten worse because we haven't had that opportunity. There's a lot of litigation back and forth, and I need to, as governor, sort out what litigation makes sense, what doesn't. Can we not have a conversation about this?
Now, Craig Fleener, who was your original lieutenant governor candidate, I understand is still out there campaigning.
He is.
Have you learned a lot from him? And
Oh,
if so,
my.
what?
I have. What a wonderful individual. He's from Fort Yukon. Tremendous career in the military and actually in the National Guard as well. I have learned a lot from Craig. Traveling with Craig out in rural Alaska, it's just been really enjoyable. And to have him still, working on the campaign has been very helpful.
So, when you stand up on the third floor and you look at all the governor's portraits there, who do you identify with the most?
It's a combination of, I knew Bill Egan in Valdez. I met him actually on a fire hose we had a volunteer fire department. He was there one time as governor, holding on to the hose in front of me, shaking hands with his right hand, holding on the left for the hose. Jay Hammond and Wally Hickel. I certainly spent a great deal of time with Wally Hickel. So those three are sort of the ones that I probably draw to the most.
And so what would they bring, their memories and their connections to a Walker governorship?
I think the leadership. I remember well when Governor Hammond defeated Governor Hickel, Governor Egan. The three of them sat down shortly after the election and said, "Okay, now what are we going to do?" And Governor Hammond suggested they work on the gas line. They went and formed the Yukon. Governor Egan, Governor Hickel formed the Yukon Pacific. One very strong Democrat, one very strong Republican. But they sat down and said, "How can we help Alaska with basically what we know?" That's what I like so much about those days in Alaska, and I think we can recreate that. That's why I want to recreate it. That kind of an attitude of, it's not a partisan battle back and forth. It's just a bunch of Alaskans saying, let's fix these things.
When I met with you about 10, 12 years ago to hear your positions on LNG, I didn't get the sense back then that you were thinking about being governor. So Or were you? And if not, when did the switch flip?
Well, you're right. This has not been a long-term kind of itch I've had in any way. I think after I brought a number of administrations, specifically this administration, sort of how we need to be doing developing our resources, and it just doesn't get done. And the market comes to me, and I went to the market, and they call me. They're constantly saying, "What's wrong in Alaska?" Finally, I said, you know what? I need to step up and do what I've never wanted to do is run for governor, and to be able to make sure that these resources are developed in such a way that it complies with the Constitution, with the best interests of Alaska in mind. Bring them to Alaska, bring them to the world market, bring down the cost of energy. So it's more out of, after the last election, I took Mitsubishi to Juneau 1 week after the Fukushima earthquake. I didn't stop working on anything because I didn't win the election. That's not the way it works for me.
Okay, but final question for you. I mean, somebody has to win, somebody has to lose. If you lose, what will you do?
I think I'll continue to do what I've been doing. I don't think there's any big. I'm not doing this and then it's all over. I'll continue to work on what's best for Alaska. I have taken some of these projects as far as I can without having an administration that will engage. And so that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. The last piece, the only piece we need for Alaska to be properly developed is leadership. We don't have that now. So I will continue to, I have a fine company, I have a fine law firm, I have a great team. We'll continue to do what we do on resource development, but recognizing that I think that our method of delivery with this administration is not going to get us across the finish line. We're going to remain in study hall, controlled by those that with the competing projects around the world driving our ship, which makes no sense.
All right, well, we'll just have to see what happens, but I want to thank you, Bill Walker, for taking time out to give us a look into your thought processes, and we'll have to see where it goes, but thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you, Rhonda. Thanks so much.